After completing my 10th class exams in 1979, my father suggested that I go and help my father's uncle and learn astrology. Mathematics being my favorite subject, I learned the calculations. My grandfather taught me how to calculate the inclinations of each planet and how to calculate the lagna and the meridian center MC, and he gave me some birth charts to draw. Thus, I learned how to draw the birth charts first and showed interest in predictions. So, my grandfather told me some predictions, some of the tips that he usually uses for predictions, and after learning those tips, I documented some of them. I verified with my father. While my father and my grandfather have laid the foundation for me to get interested in astrology, for almost a decade or 2 decades, I didn't show any interest. Hi, this is Sastry Karra, and here I'm going to tell my opinion about the outcome of the US presidential elections that's going to happen on November 8th, 2016. We are all know that the two candidates are, one is Hillary Clinton from the Democratic side and Mr. Trump is on the Republican side. So assume that based on the current what you call this polls, the possibility for Trump to get defeated is very high. So I took this opportunity and went through using the Hindu astrology principles, analyzed his birth chart, then superimposed with the transit planets at the time of elections, and then superimposed with the actual birth chart of the country, and tried to see if Mr. Trump is defeated, will he concede? During the third final debate, when Chris Wallace, the moderator, asked the same question, he said that he will see. He did not say that he will accept his defeat, neither he said that he will reject it. So that made me excited to go to the Hindu astrology principles and see what exactly might happen. Please note that this is just the astrological predictions. These are not the guarantees that it will happen, but to the best of my astrological knowledge, I tried to analyze it and come up with exactly what might happen. So let's first superimpose the transit planets as of 8th November 2016 with Washington DC as the place of birth and 11:59 p.m. as the time of birth. The reason why I took that one is with the assumption that by 11:59 p.m. on election day, most of the states' results will be confirmed, and you will be knowing that one of the two candidates will get a 270 majority. So let's start and see this. This is the NATO's birth chart. Let me first talk about his career. In Hindu astrology, 10th house deals with the profession or career. For this NATO, Venus is the lord of the 10th house, residing in the 12th house and co-joined with Saturn. Saturn is the lord of the 6th house, indicating 6th house indicates employment conditions. And now let's go and look at the 10th house. In 10th house, we see Sun, first house lord, and Rahu. Sun generally indicates some sort of a relation, either a government employment, or if the NATO is doing a business, something that deals with government pertaining to his business. And if you look at the 10th house in Sun and Rahu, they both are having a direct aspect on the 4th house, which is home life environment. So his business, if he's a businessman, his business, since we knew that he's a businessman, rephrase it that way. Since we knew that he's a businessman, his business pertaining to the government will have a direct relationship with the home life environment. Now let's consolidate the known information. With Venus as the 10th house lord and Sun in the 10th house indicates that the possibility for this NATO to be a leader or a CEO for a company. If he's an employee, he will become a CEO. He will be a big leader in a big high management position or executive management position. If he owns the company, then he will be the CEO for that company. And that company's primary business pertains to entertainment. Now the question is, why entertainment? If you look at it, the 10th house lord is in the 12th house. 12th house pertains to entertainment, and in the 12th house what you see is Saturn, the 6th house lord, pertaining to employment conditions. With Rahu residing in the 10th house, the business will be something against the social norms, period. So it depends, the social norms depends upon the era when the NATO was doing the business. And if you look at this NATO, the NATO's business is pertaining to, it's in entertainment industry or fashion industry. So, and whatever the business that the NATO is doing is not usually accepted in the society. Now with Saturn co-joined with the Venus, the employment conditions will be different from the regular workplace. And also the nature of employment of work will be acceptable only by a small number of people. Because Sun is also the lord of the 7th house, and 7th house deals with business, the NATO can either be an employee in a company or be a CEO of his or her own company. Now let's go and back to the 12th house. With Saturn co-joined with Venus, the employment conditions will be different from regular workplace. And with Rahu and Sun having a direct aspect on the 4th house where Moon is residing. Remember, Moon is the lord of the 12th house. The NATO will shine as a leader or a CEO in the entertainment industry only. So we all knew that this NATO is shined very high, is shined in the entertainment industry. That is one of the business, is the entertainment industry. Now the question comes is, why is he entering this politics? NATO announced his intention to in June 2015 that he wants to run as the potential Republican candidate for president post. During that period, transit Saturn is in the 4th house having a direct aspect on Sun. Sun indicates government, and Sun is the 1st house lord, that is self. Now let's go back and look at the reasons for his interest in politics. In June 2015, Rahu Mahadasa is running, and it is final phase. In June 2015, Rahu Mahadasa is running. It is in its final phase. That is, the last phase is Rahu / Mars. Rahu is the Mahadasa and Mars is the Antardasa. And natal Rahu is in the 10th house co-joined with the Sun, and Mars is in the 1st house. That is one reason. Now the second reason is transit Rahu and transit Jupiter, they both are in the 1st house. That means in June 2015, transit Rahu and transit Jupiter are in the 1st house self. Natal Rahu and 1st house lord Sun are in the 10th house profession, and natal Mars is in the 1st house. This indicates clearly that during the Rahu Mars period, the NATO had shown his interest to join in politics. And to add further, transit Saturn, who is the lord of the 6th house, is in the 4th house and having a direct aspect on the 10th house, where natal Rahu and natal Sun are residing. Before transit Jupiter left Leo, Leo is the 1st house for this NATO. So transit Jupiter left Leo is somewhere in June 2016 or June or July 2016, you can take somewhere there. So before transit Jupiter left 1st house, the NATO was elected as the presidential nominee. So if transit Jupiter had left before June, the NATO would not have been selected as the nominee. It's the transit Jupiter which co-joined with transit Rahu in the first house. Yes, it became so strong that the NATO has turned and became the political nominee. So let's go back and see where is transit Jupiter doing. Until June 2017, somewhere July 2017, transit Jupiter will be in the second house, which is wealth. The second house deals with Dhanasthanama and Kutumbasthanama, or wealth and family. And transit Jupiter will be co-joining with natal Jupiter. They both are having a direct aspect on the 8th house, which Jupiter owns. 8th house deals with the secret affairs or secret dealings. Both Jupiter, natal and transit Jupiter, are looking at the 6th house with their 5th aspect and 10th house with their 9th aspect. With Jupiter Mahadasa running in March 2016. Jupiter Mahadasa started in March 2016. So with Jupiter Mahadasa started in March 2016, for this NATO, it is the Jupiter that decides the future. Remember, I told you both transit and natal Jupiter have co-joined in the second house. So it is the Jupiter which decides what's the next step for this NATO. Being the 8th house lord, usually the 8th house lord is considered as a functional malefic. Here Jupiter is the 8th house lord. So it indicates that Jupiter is a functional malefic. Now residing in the second house indicates that loss or some hurdles pertaining to family and or savings. When I say savings, I mean money, because it is the Dhanasthanama or wealth. Since this presentation is especially pertaining to US presidential elections, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the Vimsottari Dasa, which is the planetary period calculated in Hindu astrology based on the motion of the moon, more in detail. On the election day, what I'm going to do is, on election day, that is around 6 a.m., we'll assume Washington DC, Jupiter and Saturn, we know that they both play vital roles. So let's go back and see the Vimsottari Dasa. And on the election day, we'll go more in detail and see what is it and which planets are being affected. Okay, now let's go and look at the NATO's, the two important Dasa systems used in Hindu astrology. One is called Vimsottari Dasa and other is called Yogini Dasa. On the election day, which is 8th November, according to Vimsottari Dasa, the period is Jupiter/Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, and the Venus sub period starts on 6th November at 21:20 and ends on 9th November at 13:55. This is very important to know. See here. First and foremost, we all know that Jupiter, the Mahadasa, the transit and natal Jupiter are in the second house looking at the 8th house, which is secret dealings, and both transit and natal Jupiter are having a 5th aspect on 6th house, employment conditions, and the 9th aspect on the 10th house, career, where Rahu and Sun are residing. The next is the Saturn. Saturn is in the 12th house. So the transit if you look at the 12th house, 2, 3, the Saturn's third aspect, natal Saturn's third aspect is on the second house. Second house where both natal and transit Jupiter are residing. Usually whenever there is any sort of relationship between natal Saturn, between Saturn and Jupiter, whether it is natal or transit, that results in disappointments and hurdles. So when Saturn period started in 2016 July 13th and it will last all the way till November 15th. So you might have noticed that after July 13th, the NATO started seeing some disappointments and hurdles pertaining to his trying to get elected. So that's very important thing that we need to keep. Now let's go to transit Saturn. Transit Saturn's third aspect is again on the 6th house, employment conditions, and transit Saturn's direct aspect is on the 10th house. Remember, both natal and transit Jupiter are looking at 6th and 10th house, and now transit Saturn is also looking at the 6th and 10th house. And if you look at the period, it is Jupiter Mahadasa, Jupiter Antardasa, Saturn Pratyantara Dasa, Jupiter Sub Sukshmantara Dasa, and Venus below Sukshmantara Dasa. So when you look at it all the way up to Sukshmantara Dasa, it is Jupiter and Saturn there that are playing very important roles. So anything pertaining to the NATO starting 2016 10/29, that is 29th October, starting 29th October will be resulting in hurdles and disappointments, that is for sure. And there's a possibility for some sort of a secret affairs being revealed, or secret dealings being revealed, or something pertaining to employment conditions or career, secret part of it is getting revealed. All these things happen after October 29th. Give and take, plus or give and take a week here and there. Now the next comes is the Venus. The Venus sub-period started in November 6th at 22 hours, 21 hours 30 minutes. Venus is very important here. You look at Venus. Venus is the lord of the 10th house and the 3rd house. 3rd house is communications, 10th house is career. And Venus is residing in the 12th house, co-joined with Saturn. So Venus became afflicted here because of the Saturn being co-joined, and anything pertaining to Venus is now became a negative part because of this co-joining. Now we'll go further deep into the called as the Dehantara Dasas in this Pratyantara Dasa. That means we know the Venus period started on 6th November. So we will subdivide it, break into further pieces and see more in detail. So if you look at it on the election day, starting at 6:10 a.m., Jupiter period began, and it goes all the way till 1447. So that's the period when the NATO will see disappointments or hurdles on the election day. And then comes the most important thing is Saturn. Saturn period began at 1445 on November 8th, and it went to next day morning at 1 a.m. So remember, after 1445 and before 1 a.m. on the next day is when the results will be declared, assuming that all the counting is done and there were no problems. And now that Saturn is there, Saturn is the Dehantara Dasa, with Saturn residing in the 4th house, touching the moon, the NATO's mind, and Saturn having a relationship with the 6th and the 10th houses, and Saturn is having a relationship with the Jupiter, who is a lord of the 8th house. It's very difficult to predict what exactly will happen between 1447 on November 8th and 1 a.m. on November 9th. This is according to Vimsottari Dasa. Now let's go to the Yogini Dasa. In Yogini Dasa, when you look at it, Sun Mahadasa started on September 1st, and it goes all the way. So we don't need to worry how long it went. And when you look at the Dasa periods, Mahadasa, Antardasa, Pratyantara Dasa, and Sukshmantara Dasa, you will go all the way to Sukshmantara Dasa. It is Jupiter Sukshmantara Dasa, S as in Sukshma, D as in Dasa, SD. So Jupiter SD started on November 8th at 8 o'clock in the morning, and look, it went all the way till 3:45 a.m. the next day. That means Sun is the lord of the 1st house, which is self, residing in the 10th house, which is career. So something pertaining to self and career is what is going to happen at that time. Jupiter is the lord of the 8th house, secret dealings, and Saturn is the lord of the 6th and 7th houses. And I already said that Saturn, Jupiter, and Sun. These three are interrelated either by co-joining or by aspects, whether it is natal or transit. So when you go to Jupiter SD, it's 7:50 a.m. to 3:45 a.m. of the next day is the crucial period for this native. That is when the elections begins. And on the election day, let's go step by step. First of all, from 7:50 a.m. till 9:29 a.m., it's again that's Jupiter's Pranantara Dasa, and you will see some hurdles here and there. And then comes the Mars. Be careful here. Mars is starts at 9:30 and goes at till 11:45. Remember, Mars is the lord of the 9th house, Dharmasthanamo, and the Jupiter Saturn being malefic, and Mars another malefic, being the lord of the Dharmasthanamo, indicates that something adharma will happen during that time. And again with Saturn picking up at 14:28 and going all the way till 17:47 on that day, you will see some sort of a disturbances. And the most important thing here you have to see is the Rahu. When Rahu comes into picture, first of all we will see what is Rahu doing in his natal chart. Transit Rahu is in the first house, which is self, and joined with natal Mars, who is the lord of the 9th house, Dharmasthanamo. Keep that aside. Now go to the transit Rahu, natal Rahu. Natal Rahu is in the 10th house, owned by Venus, and co-joined with Sun. Sun is the lord of the first house. So when you see it, Rahu and Sun are having a strong bondage, whether it is a natal Rahu or a transit Rahu. And for this strong bondage, they have Mars co-joined, and because Mars is in the first house and Mars is the lord of the 9th house. And down the road I'm going to show you the aspects, how these transit planets are aspecting. And when you look at the aspects of the first house, it will be transit Mars looking at the transit Mars. Let me go back and see the transit aspects of the first house, which I'm going to show you later, but I'll just give you headlines here. Just a second. Yeah, I got it. Transit Mars 8th aspect is on the first house, where you see the natal Mars. Okay, transit Rahu is residing in the first house again, and transit Saturn's 10th aspect is again on the first house. So when you go back to this Yogini Dasa, you will see how the Sun, Jupiter, Saturn and Rahu, how they are correlated, and the bondage, how strong is that bondage. Usually Rahu is the catalyst for Saturn, and Jupiter is the 8th house lord, and the Sun is in the 10th house. But transit Sun, as I am going to say earlier, transit Sun is in Libra, where it got debilitated or Nicha. So overall, on November 8th, after 21:40, nothing can be said. What exactly is going to happen, nobody knows it, because it's Rahu co-joined with Saturn, Jupiter and Sun. This is impossible to say. So what I think is that if anything that happens before 21:40 is concrete, after that everything is volatile. Let's now look at the transit planets on election day at 23 hours 59 minutes, and the place being Washington DC. So when you look at the transit planets, let's start with transit Rahu. Transit Rahu is in Leo, and it is co-joined with natal Mars in the first house. That means in the first house, transit Rahu is residing, co-joined with Mars, natal Mars, and natal Mars is the lord of the 4th house, home life environment, and 9th house, which is the Dharmasthanamo. Rahu co-joining with a malefic Mars indicates that something pertaining to against Dharma is going to happen at that time, and some chaos or some sort of a disturbance in NATO's home life environment. This is a possibility with transit Rahu residing in the first house at that time. Now let's go to transit Jupiter. Transit Jupiter we see will be in Virgo, which is the second house, and co-joining with natal Jupiter. That means Jupiter became very strong here. Remember, for this NATO, at the time of election, that Mahadasa or the primary planetary period is Jupiter. So Jupiter is the one who has to do something for this NATO. Let's go and look at the houses it owns. Jupiter owns the 5th house, which is children, and 8th house, secret affairs. So Jupiter being the lord of the 8th house indicates that it is a functional malefic. A functional malefic residing in the 2nd house will have a direct aspect on the 8th house, which is its own. So some sort of secret affairs or something pertaining to that was secret will be revealed at that time. Let's now go to the transit Sun. Remember, Sun is the first house lord for this native, and Sun is residing in the 10th house, which is career. So the transit Sun is in Libra at the time at the election, on the election day. So, and Libra for Sun, Libra is debilitated or Nicha according to Hindu astrology. So the first house lord residing in the 10th house, the transit Sun became debilitated. That means it became weaker, very weak at that point, which is in the 3rd house. 3rd house deals with communications. Just keep that in mind. Now let's go to the next one is transit Saturn. Transit Saturn will be in Scorpio, and in Scorpio for this natal moon is residing. Natal moon is the lord of the 12th house. 12th house pertains to pleasures of bed, spirituality, and sometimes it's also considered for possible imprisonment. And when you look at the 12th house, natal Saturn is residing there too. And natal Venus, who is the lord of the 10th house, is also residing there. So transit Saturn touching natal moon at the time of election, and you see the natal Saturn and natal Venus are in the 12th house owned by moon, is something that tells you that some secret affairs or whatever it is will be pertaining to those will be revealed at that time. One more time. Let's now go to Mars, transit Mars. Transit Mars is in the 6th house. 6th house deals with employment conditions. Natal Mars is in the 1st house, and transit Mars residing in the 6th house, what it might do, because it is the natal Mars being the 9th and the 4th house lord. 9th house is Dharmasthanam and 4th house is home life environment. Transit Mars, which is another malefic in the 6th house, will create some sort of a hurdles pertaining to the home life environment, and something that is against the dharma is sure to happen. Now let's go to the moon. Moon is mind. Remember, moon is the lord of the natal moon is the lord of the 12th house, residing in the 4th house and co-join with transit Saturn. That means the natal moon got afflicted. Now transit moon is in the 7th house. 7th house transit moon means 7th house deals with business. So transit moon in the 7th house indicates that the native will have some sort of a business relationship or something pertaining to his business, and because this is in the 7th moon and natal moon's direct aspect is on the 1st house where Mars and Rahu, transit Rahu and natal Mars are residing. So this something will pertain to the self and be against dharma. One more time. And when you look at the transit Saturn, one more time, transit Saturn is touching natal moon, which means that the native is going through the Shadeshani or 7.5 years of the transit Saturn path, where this is the second phase of the Sade Shani, and which indicates that the NATO will, whatever the troubles that the NATO is going to have, will be mostly emphasized pertaining to the 4th house, which is home life environment, the 12th house, because natal Saturn is residing there, and transit Saturn and natal moon's direct aspect from 4th house is on the 10th house, which is career, where the 1st house lord is residing. So you'll see a lot of things happening at that point. Now let's go and look at the transit Jupiter aspects. The very important here to note is, for this native at the time of election, on the election day, Jupiter Mahadasa is running. So the transit Jupiter and natal Jupiter, they both play a vital role for this person. And if you look at the transit Jupiter has co-joined with natal Jupiter in the 2nd house. 2nd house deals with wealth and family. And let's start looking at the transit Jupiter aspects. Transit Jupiter's 5th aspect is on the 6th house. 6th house is employment conditions, where you have transit Mars residing there. That means both natal and transit Jupiter, the 8th house lord. 8th house lord is usually considered as a functional malefic. So a functional malefic Jupiter is looking at Mars, another violent planet, and Mars is the lord of the 9th house, which is the Dharmasthanamo. 8th house pertains to secret affairs or some secret dealings. So this tells you that between Jupiter and Mars, because of this transit and natal Jupiter's 5th aspect on the 6th house, where transit Mars is residing, 6th house dealing with employment conditions, deaths or illness, this indicates that some sort of a secret dealings might occur during this period. Now let's go and look at transit and natal Jupiter's direct aspect, which is on the 8th house, its own house. 8th house is empty, but we know that what is going to happen because of that. And let's look at the Jupiter's 9th aspect. Both the transit and natal Jupiter's 9th aspect is on the 10th house. 10th house is career and profession, and in 10th house you see the 1st house lord Sun and Rahu. And when you look at it, what can happen is this secret dealings pertaining to employment conditions and family and wealth is, and then now you relate that to Sun, which is the government, and Sun being the lord of the 1st house indicates self. So let's see exactly what might happen because of this transit and natal Jupiter's 5th aspect, 7th aspect, and the 9th aspect. Now that we have seen the transit planets' positions, in which houses they are residing, when you superimpose on the native's birth chart, let's go and look at each transit planet's aspects. Let's start with Mars. Mars' 4th aspect is on 9th house. So remember, the natal Mars owns that 9th house, Dharmasthanamo. So transit Mars is also looking at the 9th house. That means the 9th house lord, who is residing in the 1st house, and transit Mars is looking at its own house. This is very, very important, because Mars being the malefic planet, considered as a malefic and violent planet, and looking at the 9th house will be indicating that there is something pertaining to adharma is sure to happen. Now let's go to the transit Mars 7th aspect. 7th aspect is on 12th house. 12th house owned by Moon, and in 12th house you see natal Saturn and natal Venus. First of all, natal Saturn is the lord of 6th and 7th houses, and natal Venus is the lord of the 10th house. That's very important here. So malefic transit Mars direct aspect is on malefic natal Saturn, resulting in disturbances in 6th house, because transit Mars is already residing in the 6th house owned by Saturn. 6th house deals with debts, illness and employment conditions. And now comes the Venus. Transit Mars 10th aspect is on natal Venus, and Venus is the lord of the 10th house and the 3rd house too. 3rd house is communications and the 10th house is career. So this malefic transit Mars looking at Venus creates some sort of a disturbances in the 10th house, which is career, and some sort of a disturbances pertaining to communications. And transit Mars 10th direct aspect being on the natal Saturn, which is the 6th house, indicates some sort of a disturbances pertaining to employment conditions. Now let's go and look at the transit Mars 8th aspect. Transit Mars 8th aspect is on the 1st house card. In the 1st house you have natal Mars. That means your Mars, this Mars, the native's Mars, got double amplified here. Transit Mars is looking at natal Mars. That means Mars got very, very strong here. And natal Mars is the lord of the 4th house, home life environment, and the lord of the 9th house, Dharmasthanamo. To add further, transit Rahu is also in the 1st house. That means transit Mars 8th aspect is on transit Rahu. This is something, and this is in the 1st house. 1st house is self. This is something very important to see how things goes by to this native at that time. Now let's go and look at transit Saturn aspects. First and the foremost, you look at the 3rd aspect. So residing in the 4th house, the 3rd aspect is on the 6th house, that is its own house. The own house indicates debts, illness and employment conditions. Remember, the transit Mars is residing in the 6th house at that time. That means transit Saturn's 3rd aspect is on transit Mars. And natal Mars is the lord of the 9th and 4th houses. 4th house is home life environment, and 9th house is Dharmasthanamo. And transit Saturn is residing in the 4th house, that means owned by Mars. So what you see here is transit Saturn is residing in the house owned by natal Mars, and transit Mars is residing in the house owned by natal Saturn, and transit Saturn's 3rd aspect is on transit Mars. This is the biggest worrisome combination. Now let's go and look at the transit Saturn's 7th aspect. This is directly on the 10th house. As I said earlier, 10th house is where you have the 1st house lord Sun and Rahu. And transit Saturn's 10th aspect is on 1st house, where you have natal Mars and transit Rahu. So if you combine transit Saturn, what you notice is transit Saturn is looking at the 1st house lord Sun in the 10th house, and transit Saturn is also looking at the 1st house. That means it is looking at the house and the house lord at the same time. Number 2, transit Saturn is looking at natal Rahu, the direct aspect, and transit Saturn's 10th aspect is on transit Rahu. Third, transit Saturn is looking at natal Mars, and transit Saturn is also looking at transit Mars. This itself tells you that, and transit Saturn is touching Moon. Moon is your mind, and Moon is a lord of the 12th house, where natal Saturn is residing. So this complex combination is indicates that there is something that what nobody can anticipate it will happen on this day at this time. Now let's look at the two least important planets, transit moon and transit sun. Generally these two are not considered that much when we are looking at the analysis, but for this NATO, the both are very important. First, let's start with Sun. Sun is the first house lord residing in the 10th house. That means the NATO has the ability to have some sort of a career or a profession that has dealings with the government. Okay, so let's go and look at transit Saturn. Transit Sun is in Transit Sun is in Libra at the time of on this day, an election day, at 23 hours 59 minutes. And transit Sun in Libra indicates that it is debilitated or Nicha. That means it became very, very weak. So the natal Sun got afflicted with transit Saturn, and transit Sun is now became very, very weak. And if you look at transit Sun residing in the 3rd house, its direct aspect is on the 7th house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, is on the 9th house. Sorry. So residing in the 3rd house, transit Sun direct aspect is on the 9th house, which is Dharmasthanamo. And remember, the 9th house has been, the Lord Mars has been so much afflicted by Mars, by transit Saturn and natal Saturn, and transit Rahu is co-joined with natal Mars. So the 9th house lord being afflicted so much, and now a debilitated Sun, the first house lord, residing in the 10th house, a debilitated Sun is looking at the 9th house, indicates that the weak Sun would try to do something that's against the Dharma. Now let's go and look at moon, transit moon. Before you look at transit moon, first and foremost you need to see is where is the natal moon. Natal moon is the 12th house lord residing in Scorpio and touching transit Saturn. That means right now the NATO at this point, the NATO is going to the Shadeshani, second part of Shadeshani, the first part being transit Saturn in the 12th house and the second part being transit Saturn touching natal moon. So this NATO is going through that Shadeshani, indicating that there will be some sort of a hurdles, disappointments for this NATO, and moon being your mind will not be stable. So there will be some sort of a mental anguish or mental anxiety or something in your mind that creates bad or wrong or makes you to take wrong decisions. That is the moon part. Now let's go and look at the transit moon. Transit moon is in the 7th house. 7th house indicates the business. And transit moon's direct aspect is on 1st house. 1st house is self. And look at who is in the 1st house. At the time, natal Mars is already in the 1st house. Natal Mars is the 9th house lord, and transit Rahu is there in the 1st house. So your mind, transit moon is your mind, is now touching transit Rahu, and natal moon is touching transit Saturn, indicating that your mind will be fully disturbed at that time. Now let's go and look at the each house's multiple aspects. First we start with the 1st house. When you look at the 1st house, transit moon direct aspect is on the 1st house. Moon is the lord of the 12th house, so and residing in the 7th house. And transit Mars direct as 8th aspect is on the 1st house, and transit Saturn's 10th aspect is again on the 1st house. So when you look at it, the transit Saturn, a malefic, is looking at the 1st house. Transit Mars, a violent planet, is looking at the lord of the 9th house. The most important is Mars is the lord of the 9th house, Dharmasthanamo, is looking at the 1st house, and transit moon, the native's mind, residing in the 7th house is looking at the first house. So the first house is now so highly afflicted. Now let's go and look at which planets are aspecting the 6th house. 6th house deals with debts, 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 employment conditions and illness. Here 6th house lord is Saturn and transit Saturn is residing in the 6th house. So anything that aspects the 6th house is going to look at transit Saturn, transit Mars. Now comes the question is, transit Saturn, who is residing in the 4th house, its third aspect is on the 6th house. Third aspect is on the 6th house indicates that transit Saturn is looking at transit Mars. As I said earlier, transit Mars is residing in the house owned by Saturn and transit Saturn is residing in the house owned by Mars. Look at the bondage between these two malefic planets. And transit Saturn is residing in the 4th house, and transit Mars is residing in the 6th house. 4th house is home life environment and 6th house is employment conditions. So let's go and look at what's the other planet that's looking at the 6th house. Transit Jupiter, which has co-joined with a natal Jupiter in the 2nd house. So both natal Jupiter and transit Jupiter, they both are looking at the 6th house using their 5th aspect. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's correct. Using their 5th aspect, they both are looking at the 6th house. That means natal Jupiter and transit Jupiter are both looking at transit Mars. Remember, I said earlier that the current planetary period, Mahadasa, for this natal is Jupiter. So this double Jupiter, natal and transit Jupiter, now became the strongest Jupiter for this natal. And this strong Jupiter is looking at 6th house employment conditions where transit Mars is residing and that employment conditions is owned by natal Saturn. Now let's go and look at the last important house is the 10th house. 10th house pertains to career or profession, and because this is on the election day, this indicates what will be the native's profession the day after. So 10th house is very important for this native in general, for this any native. And now if you look at the 10th house, the 10th house lord is Venus. Venus is co-joined, natal Venus is co-joined with natal Saturn in the 12th house owned by Moon. Now, where is Moon? Natal Moon is in 4th house, Scorpio. And in the 10th house, natal Sun, the 1st house lord is residing and Rahu is also residing there. So whenever Rahu is in the 10th house and co-joined with the self, it indicates that there will be a number of ups and downs in the native's career. So just keep that in mind. Next question is, which planets are looking at 10th house? Transit Saturn and natal Moon, the 12th house lord, they both are looking at the 10th house direct aspect. And natal Jupiter and transit Jupiter. Remember, I told you that Jupiter became very strong here and the current Mahadasa is Jupiter. So the double Jupiter is looking, using its 9th aspect, is looking at the 10th house too. So Jupiter, both transit and natal Jupiter are looking at the 10th house where the 1st house lord is there and Rahu is there. Transit Saturn and natal Moon, they both are looking at the 10th house. This indicates that transit Saturn being the 6th house lord, which is the employment conditions, and the lord of the 7th house, which is business, is now directly looking at the 10th house and with Rahu, indicating that some some disturbances pertaining to his employment conditions if he is an employee, or some issues with his business if he is a businessman, and these issues will be related to the government. So when you look at the superimposed chart, the inner chart is Trump natal chart, and the outer chart is the country USA's birth chart. When you superimpose those two, first and the foremost you see is which planets of the candidates' natal planets are co-joining with the country's natal planets. That's the first thing you have to look at it. Here you see that for the candidate 11th house, the 11th house, where is Mercury, is a Lord, and Mercury is in its own house, is co-joined with Jupiter, Venus and Mars and Sun, which is the 8th house for the country. So Mercury is communications, and here this is the 8th house where Jupiter, Venus, Mars and Sun are residing. So we can keep this aside what the output will be. The next one is the 12th house for the NATO. The 12th house for NATO is Cancer, where Saturn and Venus are residing, and Cancer is the 9th house, that is the Dharmasthanam for the country, where Rahu is and Mercury are residing. Rahu of the country USA's birth chart is co-joining with Saturn of the NATO. This is very, very important here, Saturn and Venus. Remember, for this NATO, Venus is the 10th house lord. Keep that in mind. And next, let's go to the next part, is the ascendant for the NATO. Lagna is the ascendant. The first house lord is Sun, and when you superimpose with the country chart, you see that Sun owns the 10th house. And for this NATO, Sun is residing in the 10th house too. So when you look at the 10th house, for the country, the 10th house is Sun. For the NATO, the Sun is residing in the 10th house. And for the NATO, the Sun is the first house lord. This is the very, very, very strong point to note it when it comes to who will be ruling the country. Which individual will rule the country is through this one, which indicates that without going much in deeper, if you look just at this superimposed chart, it indicates that this NATO will be the one who will be ruling the country. But now let's go to the next planets. Is Jupiter for the NATO has co-joined with Saturn of the country. So whenever Saturn and Jupiter co-joins, it results in disappointments and hurdles. So whenever this NATO has any sort of a relationship with the country, it results in disappointments and hurdles. So keep that in mind. Now the most important is the first house of the country. For this country, United States, the first house is Scorpio. And for the NATO, in Scorpio, the NATO has Moon and Ketu, and Rahu and Sun, they both are having a direct aspect on Scorpio. That means the 10th house, Rahu and Sun are looking at the first house of the country. Remember, when you go back, the first house of the NATO is co-joined with the 10th house of the country. So the bondage between the first house and 10th house is vice versa. Like, I mean to say, the first house of the country is now co-joined, having a direct aspect with the 10th house of the NATO, and the first house of the NATO is co-joined, is residing in the 10th house of the country. So when you look at this, the chances are very high for this NATO to become the person who will rule this country.